हेलो दोस्तों, कैसे हैं आप? टुडे वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस अबाउट detailed strategy for GS paper 1. We will try to find out what sources to use, how to use them, and how they are asked in the exam hall. So I welcome you all in this session for GS1 strategy. We will try to break down what is the demand of this paper called GS1. My name is Dungar Ram and I'm going to talk about the strategy required for preparing the paper of GS1. First, when you think about any paper, first you understand what is the demand or what is the key topics that are covered in the paper. While UPSC syllabus talks very comprehensive, very broadly about what topics are covered. For example, the name of the paper is Indian Heritage and Culture, which is the segment of Indian art and culture. Then history and geography. History here means ancient, medieval plus modern, and geography of world and society. ठीक है, you have to also read about the progress of society. So we will talk in detail about the sources, the PYQs, and how to use those sources to meet the demand of the exam for UPSC paper GS1. First, let us go through what questions we should ask. First, we should ask what we are supposed to prepare, because these topics are very holistic in nature. What topics to prepare? Second, how to prepare them. Notes, books, revision, and where to use this information. You should also ask that are these sources list exhaustive, and is it enough to use these sources to address the demand of the exam? Then how you can brainstorm using these sources. So let us go through the syllabus and the required sources and the PYQs of each of the topic for GS1. See, first topic that is there in our syllabus is Indian culture, the salient aspect of art forms, literature, architecture from ancient to modern times. First, you have to understand this topic is not just about the art and culture part. It would also include some aspect of ancient Indian history. That is why I have covered the source of ancient Indian history here itself. The topics asked for ancient Indian history or medieval history for that matter are largely related to the topic of art and culture. So that is why we are trying to cover here. Also, I must tell you that these sources are not end in itself. It is not the it's not the exhaustive list that once you have done them, then you don't need to do anything else. The thing is, these are essential but not enough. You will have to think beyond them. You will have to think like the examiner. The minimum sources that you must refer to is this, the source called An Introduction to Indian Art, NCRT. Very beautiful book written for 11th class student. That's why the language is also very attractive. The description used there and the framing of all those topics is very beautiful in this book. Second, some chapters related to culture in ancient and medieval Indian NCRT. So this book you can refer. It's called Old NCRT, R.S. Sarma, written by R.S. Sarma. You can use it for your ancient Indian history preparation and also for the art and culture part of ancient Indian history. It would also cover topics like Buddhism, Jainism, and the philosophies and all those. So you can refer this book. And you must also read selective chapters of this book called Nitin Singhania. This is a really good book. You don't have to read cover to cover all the books. You have to read very selectively, referring to the topics of our syllabus. Now, how would you find out what topics are important and what topics are not? First thing that you must do, anyone who is preparing for the first time or appearing for the second time or third time, if you have to comprehensively cover this paper, then please go to internet, search for micro syllabus of UPSC. Okay, UPSC GS. Micro syllabus would mean that for this topic of Indian culture, they will give the details that for the dance form you have to cover. You have to cover the kinds of the types of musical forms practiced in India. You have to also cover the the architectural sources. the sources from the history, the written sources that are used as a historical evidences. So there is a long list of the micro syllabus. So you have to go through them. And also the second important source for us is PYQs. So we will try to look at the PYQ of latest paper, that is 2024, and try to find out how these sources are useful and if there is a limit to these sources that we have to go beyond them. See, the question is underline the change in the field of society and economy from Rig Vedic to later Vedic period. See, the question is not just about society, it is also about history. It would also include some aspect of the economy of that period. It would also include some aspect of art and culture, right? So in overall, this topic is not just one discipline, it's interdisciplinary. So you have to keep in mind that when you are reading history, you have to also understand the society that was existing back then. You have to also understand the aspect of economy and try to compare that with the current existing society and economy. Second question of 2024 was estimate the contributions of Pallavas of Kanchi for the development of art and literature of South India. For this question, you also need to understand some aspect of current which was in the art and architecture developed by Pallavas was in news for various reasons. Some of them have been recognized by UNESCO as World Heritage Site. Some have been contributed, some recent recognition given by some institute of Government of India or international recognition. So you have to link with that current aspect. Also know the facts about what Pallava contributed to the development of art and architecture of South India. You have to also understand the temple architecture, the types of temple architecture, the Nagara, Vesara and the Dravida style of architecture, right? You have to also understand the Pallava dynasty's contribution, also compare that with other dynasties like Cholas, Cheras or Pandyas, right? So you have to understand holistically what this question talks about in order to address it with good marks. Then there is a 15 marker question. It says, though the great Cholas are no more, yet their name is still remembered with great pride because of their highest achievement in the domain of art and architecture. Their name is still remembered. Why they would say so? Because when our honorable Prime Minister visits the Southeast Asian countries, many of their discussions, many of their talks do mention about the contributions of the great Chola kings. The current architecture of South India has great, legacy of the Chola architecture over there. So you have to link with that aspect. Also understand all the dimensions of the Chola's contribution to art and architecture. Then you have to address this question. So when you are reading this topic, you have to remember the facts. You have to remember their locations. You have to remember their features of the art and architecture, and you also understand the current significance of all these art forms. Okay. Then when you are going through, you have to brainstorm about the facts, the sources that we discussed, the current relevance and interconnectedness, not just about the crude facts about history or crude facts about particular dynasty. You have to also connect them with the contemporary relevance. You have to use diagrams for making them. Ki bhai, there is temple architecture, then there are three types: Nagara, Dravida and Vesara. Then you have to mention subtypes of them, right? That's the way you make good answer. You also need to use maps for that. Ki bhai, in this Indian subcontinent, the temple architectures used was, this was the region of Nagara architecture, this was region of Dravida architecture, and this was the region of Vesara architecture. So that is the understanding that you need to gain when you are studying these topics. And these topics are also important for our prelims exam. They also asked about which was the earliest inscription, what were the features of Tribhanga Mudra in dance form. They also asked about various temple types. They also asked about various travelers who traveled to ancient India, right? So this topic is comprehensively used for prelims, mains and also for the current relevance in interview as well. So do use these sources that we discussed. These three sources you have to read for this topic, and when you read them, you have to prepare them like a story which you can tell in the answer with facts, figures and contemporary relevance. Then Next topic is of modern Indian history from about the middle of 18th century until the present. When they say until the present, it basically means 1947. After that, there is a separate topic of post-independence history. Significant events, what kind of events they can be? Movements, some act like that, right? Personalities, like there were questions about comparing Nehru and Gandhi's approach to national movement, right? Issues, what were the issues? Issue was of casteism, socio-religious reform, right? So these are the aspects that you have to keep in mind. Then the second point says the freedom struggle, its various stages and important contributions from different parts of the country, right? Various stages. That means 1857, the revolt, then came the moderates, then came the extremists, then came the Gandhians, revolutionaries, then there was also the communist. All these segments of national movement, as Bipin Chandra called national movement as the most spectator freedom struggle in the world, okay, which caused a mighty empire to come on its knees, right? So you have to understand in its entirety the details of national movement and the society existing back then. For that purpose, you can refer these three books if you want to understand if you are very new to this topic and you have not studied history from the perspective of exam and have not understood the arguments of scholars and analysis of events, then I would highly recommend you to read this book called From Plassey to Partisan. The language of this book is really beautiful. It is written from a scholar perspective and it will give you a understanding of the topics, not just crude facts. Ki Gandhi came back then, he did this movement. It would give you the analysis of that, the causes of it, the consequences of it, and how historians have seen the developments in the modern India. If you don't want to go for this book, then you must definitely go for this book called India's Struggle for Independence by Bipin Chandra. This is the book which is like written holistically for our freedom struggle, and this third book, which is referred by almost all the aspirant, is the kind of notes made from this book of Bipin Chandra, that is called Spectrum, right? Brief history of modern India. Along with this, you will also be studying NCRTs, right? NCRT class 11th, class 12th, right? So those are the sources for our topic of modern India. Now let us look at the questions are asked recently on this topic. There were two questions in 2024. The first question said, question number 3 was there. It says, what were the events that led to the Quit India movement? Now, if you are answering this from a spectrum, then you will mention the events, 3-4 events were there, or whatever the number of the events were. You will first give introduction of Quit India movement, take a 1942 or whatever the date was, 8 August or whatever it was. Then you will mention the events that led to it, then point out its results, right? But if you will comprehensively understand it from, let's say, the book called Plassey to Partisan, then you will give the reasons as scholars give, right? You don't need to mug up the names of those scholars or their work or their thesis and all that. But if you can give very substantive argument for any cause or any result, then it would show a good light on your answer and you will score higher number. Then let's say if you can relate it with the contemporary some relevance of it, if government of India created or announced some celebration in remembrance of this movement, then it would be even better, right? So in all, this question required you to have the knowledge of the facts of this particular movement, the leadership of it, the philosophy of it, the events that led to it, and also the consequences that were created by this movement. Then, how far it was the Industrial Revolution in England responsible for the decline of handicraft and cottage industries in India? If, sorry, yeah, just a second. Yeah. So, this question says that how far it was true that the cottage industry in India came to decline because of the industrial revolution in England, right? So to understand it, you need to understand the hitherto or the existing trade practices of India before British, after British, then the causes and the consequence of industrial revolution in England, then the trade policy adopted by British during their rule in India, right? And also you need to have a lot of facts related to it if you want to answer it holistically. If any of you have seen, there was a very good speech by Shashi Tharoor called Oxford Union Debate. ठीक है, does Britain owe reparations to India? In that discussion, it's on YouTube, it's a beautiful lecture, you should go through that. In that discussion, he talks about the impact that British rule had on India, and also during that speech he mentions the impact on the cottage and handicraft industry, right? So why I'm mentioning these, ki the answers to such questions would not completely come from the books only. They would also come from some of the contemporary articles by the scholars. They would also come from the discoveries or some of the movies that you watch, right? So I really want you to understand that you have to keep an open mind. You have to retain the facts from the book, but apply them holistically along with the other sources that you come across, right? Then there's a topic of post-independence consolidation and reorganization within the country, right? As you would have seen recently, there is a debate going on in India about linguistic debates or linguistic issues. Let's say Maharashtrian people are saying that you should speak Marathi. In Bangalore, people are being asked to speak in Kannada, and so on and so forth. There is a three language debate as well. So those all are issues of India's post-independence consolidation, right? We have to emerge as a sovereign united country. In that regard, there are various challenges before Indian society. You have to address the issues like land reform. You have to take green revolution in order to be self-dependent. Then you have to do state reorganization, which were demanded by various groups, right? Even to this day, let's say in Manipur, there is a crisis of Metis and Kukis, right? So state reorganization issues there. Then the causes of linguistic reorganization or linguistic demand is recurring again and again. Then there are ethnic issues, then there are religious issues, then are there region specific issues. If you need to understand their fundamental or very basics of all that, I would recommend you really good sources for that. First is there is a book called India Since Independence, again by Bipin Chandra. It's a very thick book. It has lot of pages and it has lot of content. It would require you to have good amount of attention, good amount of time to mug up all this. But it's a really good book, and it will give you a very good perspective of how India has evolved since independence. And then there is a video series by name of Samvidhan. Okay, it's on YouTube, it's open, right? It was done by Rajya Sabha TV, now it's called Sansad TV. If you go through this series, then how the constitution makers dealt with the potential questions before independent India, how they would deal with issues like linguistic reorganization, how they would deal with the issues like minority rights and all that, because these all issues actually impacted the question that we had to face after independence, right? So there was no direct question in 2024. There have been some questions in previous years, but for the preparation of this topic, you should refer these two sources. Then there is a topic of world history. Okay? It has very specific topics. It has mentioned them very directly, like industrial revolution. We have seen a question based on this. If the industrial revolution in Britain was responsible for decline of Indian architecture or Indian heritage, handicraft and all that, right? So that's a direct topic. Then World War. There was a question on in 2024 about World War I. What was the essential for presentation or preservation of balance of power, right? So that was the question in 2024. Okay. Then read all of national boundaries like Germany, Italy, right? So that is the topic. Then colonization not just of India but of Africa as well. They did ask about Africa's colonization. Then decolonization, how the countries became free, and then what path did they adopt. Then political philosophy like communism, capitalism, socialism, then their forms and effects on society. So these topics, while for the topic of world history, they are there. But if you understand these topics very well, all these topics are useful for topics or papers like essay, or paper like GS4, and also if you have optional like sociology, if you have optional like PSIR or political science international relation, right, and various other subjects. So this topic is very comprehensive. While this topic is not part of our prelims, but it is useful for mains in various other papers as well. The source for this topic can be this NCERT called Contemporary World History. It was a class 12th NCERT, old NCERT. Apart from this, you can also refer any coaching's material for this, or any toppers which are easily available. I will share some of those notes in the group that you can follow. Then next dynamic topic, or the topic which is increasingly becoming more dynamic and more analytical, is the topic of salient features of Indian society, diversity in India. This topic has interconnectedness with the other topics like role of women and women's organization, population and associated issues, poverty and developmental issues, urbanization, their problems and remedies. That's the second topic. Then effects of globalization on Indian society. If you understand Indian society, then you can comprehensively address the question of effect of globalization on Indian society. Then social empowerment. Until and unless you understand the issues of poverty and population, you cannot understand the issue of social empowerment. Until and unless you understand how Indian society is organized, you cannot understand what social empowerment would mean for people residing in India. Then communalism, as we talked about, the issue of communalism was issue of post-independence, right? Reorganization, and its recurring theme in our current affairs as well. Regionalism, right? Again, state reorganization and all those issues are related. Then secularism, minority majority complex, right? These topics are of Indian society and diversity of India. The basic source which you must refer for this topic, just to gain the vocab of this subject, are of Indian society, class book in sociology for class 11th, and social change and development in India, right? These are the basic source you must read, but these sources will only provide you definitions, some of the examples, and some of the let's say scholarly arguments for it. But when you are dealing with the questions, as we will see, let's say let's look at the questions and then try to frame how we prepare for this topic. The topic says, distinguish between gender equality, gender equity, and women's empowerment. See, when you are dealing with this question, you need not just understand the definitions of the terms mentioned here. You also have to understand their interconnectedness. That first, if there is equality, then you can move towards equity. And until and unless you move towards equity, you cannot dream of realizing the women's empowerment. And empowerment would not crudely, or would not merely mean financial independence. It would be a very holistic state of women's existence, where they can make a strategic life choices for themselves. That is the demand of the question. That means you understand the essence why the question is being asked. Then what is it important to take gender concerns into account in program design and implementation? Why it should be why, right? It might be mistyped, right? So when you are making policies, and policies are made by government, right? So the second part of this question also require you to have a good understanding of our GS2 subtopics, that is polity and governance, right? How the constitution envisages in preamble that we the people of India envisage of democratic or justice based society. Then intercaste marriages between caste which have second question, that intercaste marriages between caste which have socio-economic parity has increased to some extent, but this is less true of inter-religious marriages. That means this question is not just about concept of marriage, which is the static portion of our society topic, but it also requires to have the contemporary development in this regard, that when with urbanization there has been increase in intercaste marriages between the groups which are economically equally situated, but that is not the case with inter-religious marriages. Why that is so? That require you to have very analytical perspective. Then in dealing with socio-economic issues of development, this thing require you to have understanding of some of the GS3 topics, that how socio-religious socio-economic issues of development are there. There is a social there was caste census, and even now the government is going to conduct caste census. Along with there are national family health surveys and all that, right? What kind of collaboration between government, NGO and private sector could be most productive? So you have to also understand the topics like civil society in this regard. Then there are questions again from the society. There were 6 questions this time from the topic of society and the salient features of Indian society and diversity, and all these topics associated with it. Despite comprehensive policies for equity, the topic of equity in last question, social justice, it comes from our preamble. Underprivileged sections are not yet getting the full benefits of affirmative action. Affirmative actions are given under Article 15, 16 and various other provisions of our constitution envisaged by the constitution. Now, this question, if we look at the language, it could also be asked in GS2, but it has been asked in GS1. If that is the case, that when one time it's asked in the question of constitution, second time it's asked in the question of society, then there would be difference in answer as well. So that would require you to have analytical perspective. Then question of globalization, as we discussed, once you understand Indian society and its diversity, then you can address how it has impacted the skilled young and unmarried women from various classes. Earlier it was just about globalization and its impact on family, marriage or women. Now it's very specific about the skilled young and migrated unmarried women, right? So that requires you to have very contemporary touch as well. Then how has this trend impacted upon their personal freedom and relationship with family? Many an aspirant who are appearing for this exam would fall in this category. How they deal with this and where the personal touch come, that would be seen in the answer for this question. Then critically analyze the proposition that there is a high correlation between India's cultural diversity and socio-economic marginalities. This question also require you to have very good understanding of diversity and how it is dealing with the social marginals, the vulnerable sections. Okay. Then you have to connect the dots here, right? You have to connect one piece with another, and that only will lead you to write good answer for this paper. These topics are not directly for the prelims, but they are asked in terms of application of policies. They are asked in terms of how the status of certain groups is improving vis-a-vis other groups and all that, right? So for prelims we will see separately, but for mains part you have to be very analytical when you are reading this, and you have to at least read the sources that I mentioned before. Then there is a topic of geography, very beautiful subject, very static, right? These topics are of geography. World's physical geography, distribution of natural resources across the world, including South Asia. Then Indian subcontinent, factors responsible for location of industries in various parts of the world, including India. Important geographical phenomena such as earthquake, tsunami, volcanic activity, cyclone. These are topics. Out of these 4, at least 1 or 2 topics are asked every year, right? They are repeated in one form or another. Geographical features and their location changes and critical geographical features, water bodies and ice caps, and flora and fauna and effects and such changes. So the most essential sources for these topics, they are very crucial for prelims as well. These are the 4 books that you must read. Fundamentals of Physical Geography, class 11. Then India's Physical Environment, again class 11. And for class 12, there is a Human Geography books, right? So these are the sources that you must refer, but these are not exhaustive list. You have to add more sources, right? Along with that, you can refer a book by PMF IS, that is also good. And also you have to extensively use internet to address the topics of this subject. If you look at the questions are direct as well as very analytical as well. Why do large cities tend to attract more migrants than smaller towns? If you look at the questions of our society part, where okay, young unmarried women are migrating to urban areas, and how their social status is changing. This question is from perspective of human geography, human and economic geography, right? That you address when you understand the basics of it, plus you have some current data that you learn from various reports, newspaper reading, economic survey, budget, and all that. Discuss in the light of conditions in developing countries. So this question is not just about India. It is an comparative study. You have to also mention some of the points, some of the facts from other countries. What is the phenomena of cloud burst? That is coming from, let's say, apna direct physical geographical phenomena, geophysical phenomena of cloud burst. It was in news. It keeps being happening in, let's say, our Himalayas or Western Ghats. Then what is the concept of demographic winter? It was their news when India crossed, or India turned to be largest population in the world. Right now we are largest population in the world. Demographic winter is a concept where people, their fertility rate declines and the number of the dependent population increases, right? So that is an analytical question. It doesn't come directly from the books, but if you understand the books properly, then you can answer this question very well. Then the question of groundwater potential, Gangetic Valley is on spurious decline, how it may affect food security of India. First, the question is of fact. It was reported by some report of Niti Aayog and some other bodies as well, right? There is a decline of groundwater in Gangetic Valley, the North India part. How it may affect the food security? It requires you analytical aspect of GS3 as well, right? GS3 has a topic of our agriculture and all that, so that is the topic from there. What are aurora australis and aurora borealis? These are geophysical phenomena that happens, and it was also covered in various news papers, right? How are these triggered? So it was a geographical phenomena that happens naturally, and how it's triggered, the whole mechanism of it was asked. What is twister? It was also coming from news as well as a very a geophysical phenomena, and why majority of the twisters observed in areas around Gulf of Mexico. So many people were shocked and surprised in exam to see this question, right? But it wouldn't be the case if you are reading static plus linking them to current, the contemporary developments, then you would be able to address this very comfortably. What is regional disparity? Again, regional disparity is not just from the geography, it is also from post-independence challenges. Why there is a regional disparity and why government of India adopted 5-year plans, right? So that is something that you have to understand. How does it differ from diversity? The topic of diversity from society, interlinked. How serious is the issue of regional disparity in India? You have to answer it in 250 words. So the purpose of showing you these questions along with the sources is that these sources will provide you the foundational understanding. That's we call the basics of subject. The definitions, the concept, but you will have to enrich them, do the value addition, do the brainstorming to address the questions that are asked in the analytical way, right? The questions that we have seen. For that purpose, I have created this Telegram channel that you can join. You can seek mentorship. I will also be sharing various other topics and various topics in detail, how you can, when you are reading them, what else you have to think. Think while you read, right? So that is the purpose of this channel. I hope you will continue to follow it and you will give your feedback about this video, how you perceive this and what more you expect from these discussions. Whenever you are reading, whatever you are preparing, whatever teacher, mentor, whatever coaching you are following, always remember the part that you get from the sources or the books or notes, everything of that will be 30 to 40% at max. Rest journey or the difference beyond that you will have to do on your own by brainstorming, by making your notes and making interconnection, making the connecting the dots that are there in the subject and across the subjects. That is the preparation of UPSC. UPSC is not just about mugging up the facts or mugging up the definitions and just reproducing the examples that you have learned from some sources. It is also about using them across the subjects. That's how do you do that? It will depend on how well you prepare, how what sources you follow and what guide you follow, and also how well you use your own mind. Okay, so I really wish that you do it very well, okay, and you learn from the mistakes that I made, and I really wish that you follow these initiatives so that I can come up with more such videos, more informative content for you. And that's it for this session. See you in the next one. Thank you very much.